Hey, how's it going everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. Okay, so for today's video, I wanted to talk about the current 5-star raid boss in Pokemon Go, which is going to be the mythical Pokemon Darkrai. Now, a lot of players will say that this Pokemon has fallen off quite a bit over the years, and the reason for that is because certain Dark-type Pokemon received much better moves than what they used to have, for example Tyranitar with Brutal Swing, and then of course there's a bunch of Dark-type legendaries that are now in the game that are actually quite good. So unfortunately, because of that, a lot of players tend to ignore Darkrai whenever it is in raid battles because there just simply is no gameplay significance behind this Pokemon. To that, I actually disagree. I think this Pokemon is still relevant for a variety of different reasons, most of which I'll get into later on in this video. But first and foremost, let's talk about how you could defeat Darkrai, because the list of top counters have actually changed over the past couple of years, and this Pokemon is actually much easier to defeat than it was before. Darkrai is going to be a pure Dark-type mythical Pokemon. That means it's only going to have 3 weaknesses, which is going to be Bug-type, Fairy-type, and Fighting-type attacks. It also has a double resistance to Psychic-type attacks, as well as a regular resistance to both Dark and Ghost-type attacks. So if you have any Pokemon with these kind of attacks, do not bring them against Darkrai because they're essentially going to get hard countered. Now, if you're looking for the perfect IVs for Darkrai, you will want one that is 2136, and if it's weather boosted, it's going to be 2671. Speaking of which, Darkrai is going to be weather boosted by just one weather type, and that is going to be Foggy Weather. Unfortunately, Foggy Weather is one of the rarer weather boosts that you come across, so do not expect to get yourself any weather boosted Darkrai's while it is in raids. Now, if you want to take down Darkrai with the least number of trainers as possible, you could definitely do it with just one other trainer, so long as both of you are level 40 and you bring the best counters. But if you want to defeat Darkrai comfortably, make sure you go with at least 4 trainers that are at least level 30, with the best counters that are at least level 30. Speaking of which, let's go over the best counters for Darkrai, because the list of best counters has definitely changed over the years. First and foremost, there is Mega Lucario. That is going to be the absolute best Pokemon that you could bring up against Darkrai, and the reason for that is because not only is it a hard counter, but it deals the absolute most DPS with its fighting type moves. Now, an alternative Mega Evolution that you can bring is going to be, of course, Mega Heracross, and it doesn't matter if you go the bug type or fighting type route, both of which are going to be really good up against Darkrai. Now, alongside these Mega Evolutions, you should definitely bring as many Terrakion and Shadow Conkeldurr as possible, and make sure they're bringing their fighting type moves. The absolute best move combination for Terrakion is going to be Double Kick and Sacred Sword, so if you do not have any Terrakion that are maxed out with these moves, then it might be worth using a couple of Elite TMs. It's definitely going to elevate this Pokemon as one of the best counters up against Darkrai, so you should definitely consider it. Now, an alternative is of course going to be Shadow Conkeldurr, but considering the amount of resources that are required to power it up, I would suggest just going with Terrakion. But if you're lacking in any Shadow Pokemon or Legendaries, then you can also go with regular Lucarios with fighting type attacks, as well as Conkeldurrs with fighting type attacks, both of which are not that difficult to get, and they do not require too many resources to power up, but they're definitely going to be viable up against Darkrai considering the amount of DPS that they bring. So yeah, with the release of Pokemon like Mega Lucario as well as Terrakion, this Pokemon is incredibly easy compared to how it was before. And I do think that if you're looking for a raid boss that you could farm up for Rare Candies and Rare Candy XL, Darkrai definitely fits the bill. It's super easy, does not require a whole bunch of trainers, and you could go out and take on this boss if you have the absolute best counters. In some cases, you could probably duo this Pokemon very comfortably, and I do think that for a majority of players, that's actually going to be beneficial. It's not often that we get a raid boss that you could take down very easily with just a few trainers, and I do think that whenever there is a raid boss that is like that, even if it's not gameplay relevant, it is still worth farming specifically for the raid resources. Now, aside from that, I still think Darkrai is relevant in many ways, and the reason for that is because it is probably one of the best collector's items in the game. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of players tend to forget this, but Darkrai is a mythical Pokemon. That means you cannot get this Pokemon or its shiny form from trades, and the only way you can can obtain that is, of course, by doing raid battles. So whenever Darkrai is in raids, I always encourage players to actually go after it, because if you are lucky enough to get the shiny form of this Pokemon, that's actually going to be quite unique for your collection, and it's not going to be something that you could obtain from another player. So I do think that it's quite important that you still raid Darkrai while you can, because there's no other opportunity to get yourself a shiny Darkrai. And the other key thing is that when it comes to Darkrai, it's one of those raid bosses that seldom ever returns to Pokémon GO. It's very rare that Niantic ever introduces Darkrai into the game, so I do think that while it is in raid battles, you should take full advantage of it, mainly because there is no telling when this Pokemon is going to return. So because of that, I do think there is a bit of rarity when it comes to this Pokemon. If you're lucky enough to get yourself a Shundo or a high IV shiny of Darkrai, that's definitely going to be the envy of most players around you, mainly because it's not something that you could obtain from a lucky trade. It's only going to be obtainable from raid battles, and people know that this Pokemon never really shows up in Pokemon GO. So yeah, I think those are some of the key reasons why this Pokemon is still relevant. Again, it may not necessarily be a top tier dark type like it used to be, but at the very least it is a very solid collector's item, and it's easy enough where you could get a whole bunch of rare candies and rare candy XL, and that is something you should definitely not ignore. Getting those resources are always incredibly difficult, and you require a whole bunch of them to power up the Pokemon that are actually meaningful. So because of that, you should definitely farm up this raid boss, because it's not going to require a whole bunch of resources, and I do think that it is going to be beneficial for your account, especially in the long term. But with that said, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding Darkrai down below. Is this a Pokemon that you plan to raid up while it's in raid battles, or are you planning to completely skip this Pokemon while it is in raids? Definitely say your reasons why in the comments down below, and let's have a great discussion. And if there was a tip that I completely missed regarding taking down Darkrai, make sure you mention it as well. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you ended up enjoying it and found it to be informative, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And real quick, I want to give a shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, the absolute best way to do so is going to be by joining my Patreon. If you become a paid Patreon member, it doesn't matter the tier, you'll get yourself a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon GO friends list. So that means for stuff like remote raid invites or the friendship system, if you want to play Pokemon GO with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a very different way, you could do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow. And with all that said, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.